a cigarette and walked within 5 miles of that little yellow house, my wife smells smoke. That nose is sensitive more than a bloodhound. But that smoke gets on me. And when I get around somebody that's of no faith, but of a critical spirit, of a judgmental attitude, and all those things, I start taking on those traits. For the old saying, birds of a feather flock together. That's just about the truth. But you want to be with people of faith. And Saul made it impossible for David and the mighty men to stay with him. So they went to Gilboa, and there were thousands of Philistines, mighty trained warriors in warfare. And Saul's numbers were small in comparison. And David would eventually get the news that Jonathan, his dear friend, and Saul were both dead. And eventually, David would not just be the king of Judah, but the king of the united tribes, when Israel would become one for just a brief period of time. But here, while he was exiled from Saul, he had his family and everybody with him there in this place called Ziklag. And you talk about catastrophic stress. Look here, it's down about, verse 3. Their trauma. Look at it. The city was burned with fire, and their families were taken captives of this marauding horde of ruthless savages called the Amalekites. And when those men with David, their captain, came back to their little town, it was burned and fires were still raging. And can you imagine the catastrophic stress when a little 24-year-old young soldier started looking for his young wife and she was gone? His greatest fear, they've killed my child, and he couldn't find the little baby. And now he realizes that his wife, his children, and everything they had were taken spoil by these Amalekites. So there's their trauma. And look at their tears. Verse 4. They lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. And that's sad. But this is the reality of their situation. They came back expecting the embrace of their wives and the laughter of their children. And they found a burned down town and their families and possessions gone. That was a trauma in verse 3, their tears in verse 4. Down in verse 6, their tensions. Look how bad it got. That's our text verse, greatly distressed. For the people spake of stoning David because the soul of all the people was grieved. Every man for his sons and daughters. Now there's the reality of their situation. But now here comes the power of prayer. Look at the last part of the verse. And this is the revival of their spirits, the start of it. But David. See that? But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. There's prayer. When a man that had served you most all of his life as a subordinate officer in war, and now all of a sudden, they're wanting to kill you. I believe that even compounded an already catastrophic, stressful ordeal. David's family was gone too. His possessions were gone too. And now instead of helping him and supporting him, Benny, they wanted to kill him. But David knew where to go. Now let me ask you a question this morning. Do you know where to go? When the rug's pulled out from under you, when your emotions getting all stirred up, and maybe justifiably so, you may be angry at somebody, you may be hurt by somebody. I'm not discounting the reasons why you've got an ordeal and a reality of your situation going on. But when your strength is done completely drained out of your body, what are you going to do? Their day's gone. They've been on the road. Now this happened a good while back. They probably thought immediately, let's catch them right now. That's impossible. Will we ever see our children again? And it's David's fault. If we'd have stayed with Saul, maybe it would have been all right. If. All those ifs of yesterday is not going to change today. God said a few minutes ago, I can't help where you've been, but I can help where you're going. And you can make all the plans and you can purpose that you're going to do all the big grandiose things you're going to do. And what happens? You just circle right back around to the same place. Somebody might be here this morning and you're frustrated because you can't get out of the pull of the current. You can't break the whirlpool. You try to get out and you get pulled right back into the same old stuff. So here's the power of prayer. David encouraged himself in the Lord. Abimelech, this is interesting for you Bible students, and we won't really go into it. I'm just going to point it out. But if you'll go back, and not right now, but go back to 1 Samuel 22, Saul was on one of his big terrors, and he was all upset. David had to leave him again, and he told everybody, I want to find Jesse's boy. I want to kill that son of Jesse. He wouldn't even call him David. And so Abimelech, the high priest, throws in with David. And here you're introduced to this priest here. Look at him in verse 7. Abiathar, Abimelech's son, the priest. Get this interesting story. You know what old Saul did? He did a lot of silly things. He said anybody to eat be dead before the evening. Jonathan didn't know it, got a little honey in the woods. So Saul's going to kill his own son. You can't trust people, man. You might be in the bed at the wrong place at the wrong time sometime and run into the wrong human being, and God help you. You better run to the rock that's higher than you are. You better know how to encourage yourself in the Lord. But back over there in the 21st chapter, Saul said, I want to kill the priest. And he had all the men of Israel, all the soldiers, kill Abinadab, wipe out the priesthood. They looked at him and they said, no way we can do that. And then you look back in that chapter, they had a pagan man that went in there and wiped out the priesthood. All but this one man. And he stayed friends with David. I want you to know. You know this morning, I want you to get this. Your great high priest is the best friend you'll ever have. And he'll never leave you and he'll never forsake you. And there was one in that crowd that didn't want to kill old David. There was one in that crowd that had brought life to David and had helped David all throughout these years. And so Abiathar, the priest, gave David the ephod. And David went into a private place to pray. And here's the power of prayer this morning. You that are struggling here this morning, you hear your preacher. I can't be there for you. Sometimes your family can't be there for you. And if you're out there in a zigzag this morning and it's burned down and you don't have anywhere else to turn, there is a throne room of grace that you can find yourself alone with God. And until you come to this point to where you know God is the only one that can save you, God's the only one that can keep you, God's the only one who can bless you, all these other things are unreliable, it's all fallible. But God is reliable and He's everlastingly infallible. He's not fallible, He never changes, He never weakens, He's always there. And this priest brings the ephod, the garment of the priesthood. And as a friend of David, he gives it to him. And David wraps himself in the very grace of God. Hebrews chapter 4 says we've got a great high priest passed into the heavens, Jesus the Son of God. And we can come boldly into the very presence of God and obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. David found that the grace of God cleansed him. The grace of God covered him. Oh man, when you get covered with the grace of Almighty God, cleansed by the grace of God, charged by the grace of God, that ephod was purple, it was blue, and it was red, and it was made of fine linen. And all that spoke of in the simplistic interpretation is there is a heavenly king. Blue is heaven, purple is royalty. There was a king from heaven who came not to reign, but to redeem. He shed his blood upon a cross, came out of the grave on the third day, and his blood washes sinners clean, and we can be clothed with the fine righteousnesses of the Son of Almighty God. I was born the first time of Adam, clothed in rags. I was born the second time by the second Adam, and robed and clothed in the very righteousness of the Son of God. On the breastplate, there were 4 rows of 3 precious emeralds and stones on that breastplate, signifying that my high priest has me in his heart. He reached out and got all of us. We were precious to him. They sang the song, Becky did, "You might see dirty, but